Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our lectures. Welcome back to one of our lectures on ideation. It's actually our last lecture on ideation, right? So we've learned so far four different strategies for coming up with creative ideas. We learned about going with the creative flow. We learned about mixing and matching. We learned about random stimulation. We learned about reframing. And now we're going to learn about establishing an exploratory environment. So within your textbook, this was the seventh strategy given, but we're going to skip two of them. So this is going to be the fifth that we're going to learn in class together. Yeah. So establishing an exploratory environment. Now, what does this mean for you? What does this sound like? If you didn't read the text and you just told somebody, hey, just create an exploratory environment for yourself, you'll get new ideas. What might they think that means? Well, they may think they need to, literally put themselves in a physically new environment, maybe one with more lights. They may think that they have to make their environment more stimulating and maybe put some interesting artwork around them, or maybe to play music so that they have inspiration. This isn't really what we mean here, though, by saying establish an exploratory environment. In this case, we mean your social environment. We mean the people that you're around. So to establish an exploratory environment means to establish a collaborative one, where you are working with somebody else to generate ideas. When we took a look at those first four, we described them in terms of what you can do for yourself alone. But if you think back to where a lot of our creative ideas have come from in our class, a lot of them came from you interacting with your classmates. And it's that interaction that helps you create and generate new ideas. So lots of studies are done on group creativity. You can imagine lots of corporations really interested in making their employees more creative. So we see a lot of studies on what we can do in groups to be more creative. Because I bet you've had experiences in our class where you may have worked with other people in a group and maybe it was tough to generate some ideas. But then with other groups you've worked with in our class, maybe you've noticed that it was a lot easier to generate creative ideas. So what's the difference? What happens in one versus the other? Well, it turns out that one, you need to focus on making a creative environment more than gathering certain types of people that are creative. In companies, sometimes there's this idea that we'll just get this guy and that person and this person together in a room because they're like our most creative people. And then all of a sudden they'll have lots of creative ideas together. It turns out that's not necessarily the case. It's not about grabbing the people with the weird ideas or the folks that normally have interesting perspectives and putting them together. It turns out it's much more of it's much more tied to the environment that they're in when they're together. In particular, do they have an environment where they trust one another? Do they have an environment where they're comfortable with one another? It doesn't really matter how interesting one person is or how often this person has lots of ideas. You put them together, if they don't trust each other, if they're not comfortable, they're probably not going to get very far in terms of generating new ideas. Think about how you worked with other people in our class. If you were comfortable with them, if you were able to let your guard down a little bit, if you weren't too worried about what they'd say, chances are you were able to generate more ideas when you're with them. If you're in groups where people are laughing and having a good time and not so worried about what each other thinks, I bet you had lots of really interesting ideas. And think about a class, and oftentimes when you start a class, what does a teacher do? Well, they may start the class with an icebreaker to get students more comfortable with one another. Or if you've ever been to a new company and they've given you like corporate training to get you into the company, you may notice they start out with these silly games to get you comfortable with one another. Right? It turns out that comfortability is what's necessary because it's not about getting the creative people together because everybody is creative. The problem is that not everybody feels comfortable in sharing their creativity or even acknowledging the ideas that pop up within them because they're so used to hiding it, because it's dangerous to share ideas, because people could shut you down. Which is why one of the major mottos for creativity in groups is to always agree, accept, and add. For some of you, this may sound familiar, especially those of you that have studied theater before. This is a theater philosophy. So if you are creating a scene with somebody, right? So you're two actors on stage, and your director says, "Okay, just come up with a scene," and you start out by saying, "Hey, Tony, uh, isn't that isn't that a great moon that we see up there tonight?" And then your scene partner goes, "Moon? Aren't we inside playing racquetball right now?" What happens to the scene if your partner disagrees with what you said or doesn't accept what you said? The scene stops, doesn't go anywhere. I mean, just think about your activity in groups. Whenever you've given an idea and shared it, I mean, what would happen if somebody said, "Oh, that idea is stupid. That idea sucks"? What are you going to feel? How are you going to interact with the group going forward? You're probably less likely to contribute, probably less likely to want to say anything, which means less ideas bouncing off one another. And it's true that when you just agree, accept, and add, you may disagree with the idea somebody brings up, right? But what happens when you don't care about that and accept it and add on to it anyway? Well, then the conversation continues going. Then the group continues to work with one another, and those ideas lead to another, which lead to another, which lead to another, and then eventually you have a whole pool of them, right? Which would not necessarily have happened if somebody stopped at the beginning and said, "No, I don't like that idea. That doesn't work." For a lot of people, this feels like a waste of time. Wait, I know the idea is not going to work. Why even listen to it? Because the whole point isn't that that idea has to be good. The whole point is that we generate new ideas. And by accepting theirs and adding on, we have a new one. And then adding on to that, we have a new one. And adding on to that, we have a new one. And that continues to grow. And more people feel as if they're safe. It's a safe environment for them to contribute. Yeah. Notice then that as you get to an idea, you're going to find one possibly that works, but the person that said the idea that works, it didn't really necessarily come from them per se, right? Because how did they get it? They got it from listening to this whole chain of ideas. It was an organic process that the whole group developed. So think about the problem. If you think to yourself, "No, I have to figure this out. I have to find the right idea within the group." Well, you're going to start to feel pressure, right? You're going to start to feel like there's stress on you to come up with the creative solution. And that stress, that pressure prevents you from actually generating ideas. So when you participate in groups, the strategy is to not think of it as something you have to do. I have to come up with the idea, but something that we are doing. And you're more likely to generate ideas this way. And then lastly, if you have somebody that's in charge of the creative group, right? Maybe you're a band leader for your band, or you're like in charge of the dance troupe, or whatever it might be, business, company. Studies seem to indicate that what's important is that that leader not be responsible for the right idea or the good ideas, and is like going, "This is good, that's bad. This is good, that's bad." The creative leader is better off being responsible for establishing this environment, making sure people feel comfortable, make sure people feel as if their ideas are heard and appreciated. They keep the brainstorming flowing, right? This should be the responsibility of the creative leader. Can you see how you've experienced this in the past? I mean, think about any time you've been with friends just hanging out and came up with ideas. I bet you something like this was happening, right? Okay, let's take a look at an example. Another example from the show Whose Line Is It Anyway? As we watch, we're going to see them perform a game, right? Where these actors are going to come up with a musical, improvised musical. Okay, so as you watch them come up with this improvised musical, keep an eye out for these keys to group creativity. Try to identify them and write them down. Okay, so let's go ahead and start.
Let's move on to a game called Three-Headed Broadway Star. Three-Headed Broadway Star. This is for Wayne, Ryan, and Colin. Wayne, Ryan, and Colin. Hey, what's your name? Katie, come on down here, Katie. This is Katie, everybody. You're going to be singing a Broadway love song to her. You're going to be singing a Broadway love song to Katie. Now, this section over here, fill in the sentence for me. You've got a beautiful what? What? Earlobe. We'll use earlobe. We'll use yours, earlobe, because that was the first one. You've got a beautiful earlobe. And they're going to do this with the help of Laura Hall and Linda Taylor. What's going to happen is they're going to sing a song, a Broadway love song, one word at a time. They're going to make it up. And it's called You've Got a Beautiful Earlobe, the hit Broadway musical with the help of Laura Hall and Linda Taylor. Take it away whenever you're ready.
You got such lovely ears, and I love your ears. When I swing high and low, I grab your lobes and grow your lobes. Sing to me your lobes. Hear me. Your lobes are beautiful and so moist. When I look at your earlobes, I feel so happy and gay. Hey, when you sit on my earlobes, I run like hay. Some girls don't like touching their earlobes, but you do, 'cause you're my easy earlobe girl, and I love you so much. Rubbing, tickling, caressing, locating, flambeing your earlobe.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Who's on right for this? Don't go away.
So can you see how these 5 keys were crucial for having all these creative ideas come up for us or for them in that game? Notice, though, and this may not be true for this particular example, but notice that as we do these strategies, you're going to come up with lots and lots of really interesting ideas. And interesting doesn't mean good or right or correct. Some of them might be really bad and not funny and not work. But that's okay, because you don't have to use all of the ideas. We're just casting a wide net. Because by casting the wide net, that we're in a better position to find ideas that we can use. So how can you use this strategy? Think about your projects. What would you do to take advantage of establishing an exploratory environment? Who could you get to work with you, to brainstorm with you, to jam with you? Who could you get involved, even if just for a few minutes, so you have something to write down for this part of the assignment, right? So remember, your worksheet for your final project, I want you to describe lots of different ideas you came up with when you used all 5 strategies. So it's mandatory for you to use all 5 strategies to come up with lots of interesting ideas. And just write them down. Describe them to me. Describe the ideas you came up with as a result of those strategies. You won't be using most of them probably, but hopefully you realize how much easier it is to generate new perspectives, new ideas by actively using these particular strategies. 1, going with the creative flow, free associating, just letting your mind wander, and whatever comes to the top of your mind, that's what you say, that's what you do, that's what you try out. 2, mixing and matching, putting together 2 things in a different way than they had been used before, or 2 or more things, right? Ideas, perspectives, products. I want you to use random stimulation. Somehow consciously choose to expose yourself to a new stimulus and let that inspire you to come up with another idea. I want you to use reframing to change the context by which you are thinking about something, or to reframe something in a way that gives you a new idea. And then lastly, I want you to work with somebody. Get together with a classmate, a relative. I mean, it doesn't even have to be live, right? You can brainstorm with somebody over the phone, or through your, through Skype or however it is that you meet with others nowadays, right? And notice one thing though, is that when you're watching this clip from Whose Line, in many ways it feels as if they're just going with the creative flow, aren't they? In fact, all of these really are about going with the creative flow. It's just with different types of stimulus. So in the first example, you have no stimulus. You're letting your mind wander on its own. Wherever it goes, it goes. Mixing and matching, you're putting two things together that wouldn't have been put together before, but you're still using free association to come up with lots of ideas based upon those two or more things. Random stimulation. Well, obviously, you are choosing to expose yourself to something in particular that's new, and then you free associate with it to come up with a new idea. Reframing, same sort of thing. And obviously, when you're working with other people, when you're brainstorming, it's all obviously about allowing your mind to wander where it wants to go without judging your ideas. So the fourth aspect, right? It's often called the trials and tribulations of actively generating new ideas. Because no matter what you are doing that's creative, where you're generating something new for yourself, you're always going to have obstacles. You're always going to have problems that pop up, and you're going to need to find solutions. You're going to need to find creative approaches to overcoming these obstacles, right? So obviously, the difficulty for a lot of us, as you mentioned, is that we are conditioned as we get older to be convergent thinking, right answer finding mature adults. We're taught to go for the one right answer, which limits our access to multiple ideas. We're told to not make errors, to avoid making mistakes, which means we're not very interested in exploring. And we think we're supposed to be mature adults. Well, being mature is the opposite of what's necessary in this stage of the process, because what's necessary is to be like a kid, like we mentioned earlier. That's the only way to properly use these strategies. So, what's the solution? Well, we have to learn how to play with ideas. We have to practice using these strategies so they become second nature. We have to be playful. I mean, think about all of these strategies and what they really mean, what they describe: free associating, mixing and matching, reframing. I mean, all of these things are things that kids do naturally when they play. What we're describing here is just play. We have these fancy psychological terms for these things, but what we're really describing is just being playful, right? When you find an obstacle, when you find a difficult situation that you're facing, when you're trying to create this thing that's new for yourself, it's counterintuitive, isn't it? Because our intuition might say to us to be serious and to fight, but the real strategy, we're told here, is to play. You have to be playful with dealing with the problems, because it's by being playful that you have access to different ways of, overcoming these issues. And once again, companies are very familiar with this, especially innovative companies. I mean, they're really familiar with this. And they have established different environments where play is part of the environment. Okay, so can you take a look at this image? Which company do you think has rooms like this where employees just play? Well, hopefully, it's obvious by what they're playing with that this is within Lego, the Lego company. What company might this belong to? Well, this is kind of a trick question, right? Because lots of companies now have game rooms, and game rooms are meant as ways for employees to relax, but also ways in which they can start to get the attitude of play again. In this particular case, this is a picture also from Lego. How about this? Where might who might have this sort of office? Take a look at the interesting playful seating arrangement, and looks like some dolls in the background with some maybe children's books underneath the coffee, and this little cute dog walking around. Well, this is from Airbnb. Right? Here is a look at one of Urban Outfitters' offices, and they literally have these walls where people can literally mix and match in order to come up with new ideas. Okay, who do you think this office belongs to? Take a look. What's interesting or stands out to you? Well, there's this informal sitting area, this couch, that's non-traditional for an office. Take a look at some of the lighting fixtures, right? Interesting, playful colors and shapes there. Take a look at this toy that's up in front. Right, it looks like some sort of battleship from Star Wars, maybe. This is an office that belongs to Google. Who does this belong to? Right here, look at the office nooks in the back, made up of different types of balls. And there's a little literal basketball hoop where people can, I guess, a court where people can play. Well, again, this is Google. Look at the interesting offices here with the little carts or baskets for the hot air balloons, and this little helicopter on the side. This also is a Google office. Well, Google is known for being a creative company and being an innovative company. And part of this stems from the corporate culture and the philosophy set by the founders, where they wanted to encourage all their employees to have or make use of 20% time, right? This is a philosophy that says that they want their employees to spend 20% of their work time on just playing, on exploring, following their passions to test out new ideas with company equipment, under company's time, being paid by the company. I mean, just imagine your work and how oftentimes what you're supposed to do at work is what the boss tells you to do. Well, this philosophy says no, 20% of your time here, don't do what your boss tells you to do. You do what you tell yourself to do. This is your freedom, your time to have freedom to explore and try out new things, right? And you hopefully watch this video that I posted in class about how this works. Now, flip side to this too is that sometimes people will say, well, this 20% time is encouraged, but the culture also says to make up for it somehow by spending even more time at work. The philosophy still, though, is what has generated lots of interesting products within Google, as you saw within the video. Well, how might you incorporate this into your own projects? How might you incorporate this into your own life? I mean, think about how often you're looking at life and you're so focused on your goals and you take them so seriously that you don't leave any room to play in order to maybe see what you're doing differently. I'll put it to you this way. I mean, do you know anybody that, spent all their lives trying to achieve, trying to get to reaching a certain goal, and then they wake up one day when they're 30 or 40 or 50 and they go, how did I get here? Because they're so focused on this image or this idea they had about what they should do with themselves, very serious about their time and not wanting to waste it, that they never gave themselves enough time to reevaluate what they were doing. They gave themselves enough time to think about other ideas, to gain other perspectives that may have woken them up earlier, and maybe given them an opportunity to have a different type of life, one that's more in tune with who they are. I mean, I know there's a lot of folks in our class, right, that have decided after growing up in a different country to change their lives by coming here. A lot of students in our class have lived their life a certain way and decided, no, I want to have a new career. And then they decided to come back to school to have a new career. Well, think about if you had implemented 20% time in your life prior to the change. Might you have thought about making the change sooner? Right? Think about all the other problems that you feel or you face with in your regular life, and how by playing, you may be giving yourself a chance to getting ideas that can help you with those problems. So, how might you incorporate this? What might it look like for you to incorporate 20% time into your life? And I bet you if you look, you don't think too hard about how to do it, because as you mentioned earlier, you remember those times when you were just hanging out with your friends, just joking around, and then there were a lot of interesting ideas that came from joking around? Or about going to a party and being really loose and having a good time with the people at the party, and the conversations were really interesting and led to really interesting places. All of these are examples of ways in which you could practice playing, give yourself time to play, right? So the idea here, as we mentioned earlier, is to cast a wide net. Oftentimes the hardest part of finding a new idea is giving yourself the freedom, right? Giving yourself the permission to explore and find lots of them, pushing out the walls of our sandbox so that we have a larger room, larger space to explore. And remember, it's not just that you find lots of ideas and that one of those might work for you, but as a result of playing, you put yourself in a frame of mind where ideas may more easily just come to you, right? And we'll talk about how to make that more likely in our next lecture.